Welcome to Beddgelert in North Wales for the finals of the MBC National Championships. It's the culmination of a series of races where riders gain points at each round. We'll review them shortly, but before that, let's introduce you to those we think are going to do well.
89 MBC champion Tim Davies comes from Wales. With a strong cyclocross background, he's now established as a mountain biker, but his enjoyment of the sport shows in the way he entertains the crowd.
Last year's runner-up, Tim will be using his stamina and awesome climbing ability to show his dominance of the British scene. Although racing cross and road this year, he thinks of himself as a mountain biker.
Fred was third in 1989 and is too often seen in Gould's shadow. His strength and consistency have meant that few riders have beaten him, and he's sure to place well again this year.
Nick is a very established cyclist who now concentrates on the fat tyres. By the end of 89, his results have much improved, and so he's expected to grab some great finishes this year.
A former king of the mountains in the milk race, Barry's one race last year showed that he already has the required skills. As his experience grows, look to see him near the top.
Steve Dowse is a newcomer to mountain biking, but he's to be taken very seriously, having ridden cross at international level for years and taken the national title no less than 6 times.
An established professional on the road and a track racing champion in 89, Gary undoubtedly has the speed in his legs. But what of the off-road skills? Wins in pre-season races show he's got them.
Adrian is a former pro roadie who surprised many when he first raced. Despite no established off-road background, he could be a serious challenger if he picks up the techniques.
Several other new riders to watch include Steve Knight, the Midlands Cross champion, as well as the more established mountain bikers, such as Paul Hinton, who was 4th last year, and the runner-up in 1988, Mike Newton, who returns after racing in America.
88 and 89 champion Deb Morrell will be pushed hard this year. She'll be relying on her well-known off-road control and increased strength and speed to retain the championship.
Sian was 2nd in 89 and her fell-running background has given her great stamina and running abilities. Her technique has also improved, and with more consistency she could win the title.
Former triathlete Sally Hibberd is now an experienced mountain bike rider. She's impressively strong on the hills and is determined to go all out for the title this year.
As the women's racing scene grows, there are other riders to look out for, such as Nikki Crowther, 5th in 89, Melanie Gravel, an experienced road racer and competitor in the Tour de France, and Isla Roundtree, who will undoubtedly have the skill required from her cyclocross background.
The 89 Veterans champion in his first mountain biking season, Nick has had a successful career in all aspects of cycling. His climbing will be his best attribute in the defence of his title.
Mike Parker is a serious cross-country runner and was veteran national road champion in 1988. He's been a close rival of Mick Ice for many years.
Other veterans to keep an eye on are last year's joint runners-up, Jeff Stanley and Thomas Eisel. Both have become established mountain bikers and still go out there to have a lot of fun.
Carl, the 89 champion, is still one of the youngest in the juniors category. His BMX past has given him the skills, and his move into road racing will help him defend his title.
Jake rode with the experts in 89, but is back down with the juniors after new MBC age limits. He now also rides on the road and cross and is a real challenger for the title.
The juniors field is strong in depth, with other challengers such as Jason Shackleton, who also rode experts in 89. Julian Wynne won races in novices and sports last year. Old Dan Hope was another to place well in the sports category, but has re-entered the juniors. Richard Thackeray at 16 is a very young competitor in the juniors and should do well. A number of ex-BMXers such as Sam Humphrey and Dave Hemming have the skill. If they have the strength and stamina, they too will be worth watching.
Now it's off to the races, to South Wales for the first round.
There are 3 cross-country races at each event, with the morning's first race for the juniors, juveniles, novice men and novice and sport women. The juveniles are the under-15s, while the juniors are 16 to 18 years old, and we'll be concentrating on them on the first race. The juniors had to do 3 laps, and the early leaders on the main climb are Jake Elliott riding and Carl Sturgeon pushing, while Richard Thackeray was out on his own in 3rd. This climb wasn't just very steep, it was very bumpy too, and if somebody in front of you got off, you had to walk as well. Jake maintained the pressure throughout the race and eventually opened nearly a minute lead over Carl, with Sam Humphrey riding to a great 4th in his first race. There were a number of casualties on the fast rocky descent. Despite not showing strongly in the experts last year, Jake has obviously gained from his experience, and Carl knows he's got competition. What did Jake think of it?
Yeah, brilliant race, great fun. Really enjoyed it.
How did two of the likely lasses in the expert women see the series going?
Well, it's going to be a lot harder this year. Everybody's been working really hard, I think, improving their fitness.
Well, I'm going pretty well at the moment, so I'm hoping for the best. That's all I'm going to say. I obviously want to win like everybody. We'll see how it goes.
Sally looks like she's putting words into practice and takes an early lead in the second race of the day, with Isla Roundtree confidently flying down the rocky descent in a strong second. It's probably the first time that Deb has ever been in third place in an MBC race. Fourth place Nicky Crowther isn't far behind. The other two categories in this race are the sportsmen, led by Bob Allen, and the veterans, with Mike Parker out in front. It's really tough up here, and Sally's looking strong as she comes running up this hill. Bretto's Mike Parker's got his running legs on too. And Bob closing. But who's that in the background? Tim Gould? Yes, I think so. Nice one, Tim. Sean Roberts has moved up into second, Isla dropping back rapidly. Deb Morell has stayed in third. Mick Ives, meanwhile, has lost touch with Mike. Melanie Gravel is feeling it hard on the climb. Are you feeling fit? Well, get your running legs on like this chap. The vets were last to start, but Mike is well clear of most of the field, with only the American Bob Allen keeping him in sight. It's not California, but April's hot, and water's essential. So second and third sports riders, Paul McWaters and Julian Wall, gratefully accept, though Mick has his own brew. Sally's come on strong since last season and is dominating this race. Couple of minutes lead over Sean in second. First three in the sports remain Bob, Paul and Julian. It's not easy finding long, fast, open descents in Britain, but this one's really good and the riders love to hammer. It's hard work, and at the bottom a lot of riders have got aching arms. Maybe it's a recent bout of flu that's pushed Deb back into fourth place now. She's also being caught by Nicky on the final descent. With a puncture, here comes Bob Allen to finish, but no, one more lap to go. Bob's not impressed. And Mick thinks he's finished as well. Keep on going, Mick. A delighted Sally finishes. The lap counters have stopped using braille now. And here comes Sean to second.
Really enjoyed it.
She has one lap to go.
I enjoyed the descents as well, believe it or not.
And Mike Parker gets his deserved victory after an extra lap.
Well, I haven't been mountain biking for a few months now, 4 5 months. So I've been running instead, so it seems to have worked. Well, this course suited me because it was a big climb. Well, a big carry for everybody where I was.
And a bit of blood? This guy's not worried. He's rock hard.
In the final race, it's the expert and intermediate men who are going to do 8 and 6 laps respectively. Ever impatient, they don't wait for water supplies to be replenished out on the course and decide to go off without starters' orders. Towards the end of the first lap, Tim Gould has taken the lead. He's glancing over his shoulder to see what his advantage is over teammate here, Fred Salmon. The chasers are quite close up now and include Gary Coltman and Steve Dowse. And there's the American, Mike Jordan. Along the main straight there was a strong headwind, but watching Tim you'd never guess it. And if you had any sense you were tucked in behind someone else. In this case the mug up front is Tim Davies. Adrian Timmis soon moved up into 5th place, proving he could handle it, with Barry Clark looking strong in 6th.
My God!
And by the major climb on the 3rd lap, Tim had already caught the tail enders and to their dismay was stomping up the climb. Impressive or what? Adrian's moved into 2nd place ahead of Fred.
Go on, Fred, digging.
Nick Craig is close behind in 4th.
Whoever invented this course, he's bloody shooting.
Who was that, Tim?
It was me. I need gear bashing.
Yeah, go for it.
Gould is no slouch downhill either, though Adrian is a bit tentative. Here a lap rider is unlapping himself. Fred is safely in 3rd, while Tim Gould comes in for an emphatic victory.
Warning to all kids, don't do this at home.
Fifth place, Tim Davies is having fun on the descent, as is Barry in sixth. Intermediate winner here, Adrian Rochford.
A course like this is what you find in America, though, so you've got to go good on a course like this, really.
Did you enjoy that, Adrian?
No.
Nobody will forget that climb.
Right, so Tim got this one.
The second round was near Brighton. In the juniors, Dan Hope was the unexpected leader. The course was much flatter and faster than Swansea and favoured a different type of rider. Generally, the field grouped and worked together much more than usual. Though punctures were unlikely, you couldn't rule out a touch of the mechanicals, and he's not allowed any help. Having ridden off the front of the pack, Dan was determined to stay away, but was still enjoying himself with a couple of minutes lead. The battle behind him was hotting up, with Jake Elliott eventually moving up to second ahead of Carl Sturgeon, who finally finished fourth behind Dave Hemming. Further down the field there was much swapping of places with very close finishes at the end. What did you think of the race, Dan?
At the start, everyone was just cruising, and no one was ready to make a move, so I just thought I'd go for it. And, I just kept away from the rest of the ride, and it just went well.
The expert women were first away in the day's second race. Melanie Gravel heading the field. Mike Parker wasn't riding here, so Mick Ives was determined to get those 20 winners' points. And masses of sports riders are at last away, hungry for the action. Picking up Mick Ives and Jeff Stanley here at the end of the first lap. These are the only two ahead of Sally, who has quickly opened up a lead over Isla, Melanie and Deb. Isla flies over this bump, which is probably the trickiest part of the course. Not least because traction's a problem. Paul Burwell and Steve Bryan meanwhile lead out the sports, with Bob Allen leading out the Chasing Lunatics. Halfway through the second lap, Mick has pulled away from Jeff, though Jeff is still showing he's improved on last year. In the sports race, Paul Burwell has opened up a slight lead over the chasing pair, Steve Bryan and Paul McWaters.
Keep it going. Don't know, go on.
Sally didn't need to worry. She had a comfortable lead with a large group of leading sportsmen between herself, Melanie and Deb. And here they are, working together, but already 2 minutes down. The fast motorway descent on the last lap, and Mick's looking safe, as is Paul in the sports. Steve's got second place in the bag, but though Paul McWaters was to lose out to third in a sprint finish with Adam Perk. Third place vet Barry Mitchell. Sally's increased her lead over Melanie now, and both are clear of Deb Morell. Hanging on to fourth place is Isla Roundtree, despite a late challenge by Nicky Crowther.
Big hand for Mick Ives! Paul Burwell from Brixton Cycles winning the sports class race. Give this man a big hand. Hand please for Sally Hibberd of Team Specialised winning the women's expert race.
In the next race, Steve Jockin leads out the intermediates. Matthew Denby goes by in fourth place. They've set off ahead of the expert men. Oh, Nigel Turner goes soil sampling. Maybe it's because he was pushing it a bit much with Tim Gould and Gary Coltman breathing down his neck. There's a chasing group of 6 behind them. As in the earlier races, it stayed very close, with Graham Owen now leading from Steve and Peter Legg. Though Tim, as always, defies logic in the experts, opening up a 35-second lead on the chasing group of Salmon, Timmis, Craig, Coltman and Clark. Tim will have to work on his own, unlike Paul Hinton and Steve Dowse. As the race progressed, the question was whether Tim could stay away from the group, especially on a relatively flat course such as this. Working together makes the group's job easier. Gary had dropped off and is a useful tow for Stevie Jockin, a professional roadie, though here he's riding intermediate. In 7th, Steve Dowse seriously buckled his front wheel in a rut and had to disengage his front brakes. He jumped on it later to try and straighten it out. On the motorway, Gould gets into aero position while it seems that the chasers are letting Adrian do all the work. Gary still looked strong in 6th place, with Paul moving up into 7th. On the final lap, Tim is still out the front, though his lead is reduced. The chasing group has now split up, but Fred will make sure he does not help Adrian close the gap on Tim, his teammate. Nick Craig is on his own in 4th and he's tiring, while Gary and Paul have both moved up at the expense of Barry Clark, who'd punctured. And Gary here catches Nick in the last half lap. Tim's pleased with a win on a course that's not best suited to him, even if he was only 45 seconds ahead of Adrian. And there's a 3-way sprint for 4th place, won by Gary, with Paul giving his all to get Nick just on the line. And let's have a final look at that lump.
It's East Anglia for the 3rd round, and Jake Elliott leads out the juniors. With a win and a second so far, he's leading the points table. Other categories in the first race are the sportswomen, novices and juveniles. Inevitably, the course is somewhat flat, but it has its own obstacles, such as this at the end of the lap. Jake quickly opened up a lead over Dan Hope, who takes a quick dip, and Julian Wynne. In the chasing trio are Carl Sturgeon, Dave Hemming and Richard Thackeray, who tries to ride through. No chance. Joanne Stanley, a cyclocrosser, leads the sportswomen but gets a surprise from the temperature of the water, while second juvenile Tim Bryan also gets wetter than expected. Though he's happy enough because the juveniles finish at the end of 1 lap. Close behind Joanne is second sport Julia Morgan. Halfway through, Julian Wynne and Jason Shackleton had been dropped by Jake, with round 2 winner Dan Hope in 4th. Carl Sturgeon was to put in a very fast final lap to move from 7th to 4th. Even on a technically easy course, some people run into trouble. So Jake notches up his second win and 20 more championship points, with Jason collecting 19 for second and Julian 18 for third.
Super fast starter Isla Ranfrey leads out the expert women. And Friston winner Paul Burwell heads out the largest field of the day, 130 riders in the sportsmen. The women, sports and veterans all had 4 laps to ride. The river at the end of lap 1, and it's very tight due to the flatness of the course. 8 up front, led by David Owen. And it's close in the women's race as well. Sally and Deb sticking right together. Nikki Crowther's not far behind, heading their chasing group. The crowd are loving the river, but they're keeping their feet dry. Halfway through the second race, and Davies just holding his lead from Paul McWaters and Bob Allen, with Mark Bicycle, yes that's his name, in 5th. Notice how they're all missing the stand, and there's still nothing to choose between Deb and Sally. In the veterans race now, Mick Ives is looking for revenge over Mike Parker. He's looking good. Though the main event still seems to be the ongoing battle between Deb and Sally, never more than a couple of seconds apart. Mike's a minute down on Mick, just holding his position but not closing anything. While Nicky's having her best race this season with only 30 seconds off Deb and Sally, and also having opened up a minute on Melanie Gravel. New signing for Rally, Caroline Alexander's having a good race. And in case you're wondering, this section has a number of obstacles, so that for most people it's faster to run.
Hello.
Coming up to the finish, there's plenty of winding single track, but not much chance of overtaking, so whoever got out of the trees first was probably going to be first across the line. And in the sports, that was Mark Bicycle. Bob Allen beats Julian Wall in a sprint for second, with a delighted Mick maintaining his advantage over Mike all the way.
Sally Hibberd of Team Specialised.
Sally broke clear to win the final lap when Deb's shoelace caught in her pedal, robbing the crowd of what they hoped would be a sprint finish.
Third place in this third round of the
Delighted Nicky close behind in 3rd.
The hardest race I've ridden this year.
What a naughty shoelace.
In the expert men, the lesser-spotted rally rider Rob Dane, an established roadie, led out from the start. But it was his teammate Barry Clark who was soon to challenge the Persia Stranglehold, as he led Fred Salmon over the logs. Tim Gould found himself in an unusual position of 3rd place, crashing over the logs. However, the chasing trio of Gary Coltman, Steve Barnes and Adrian Timmis preferred to run. And of course Steve Dowse could do very well on this type of course. Tim Davies leads another cyclocrosser, Chris Young, in the following group. By the end of the first lap, Tim Gould was back on terms with Barry and Fred, and it was tipping down. And Steve Barnes seems to be getting to grips with mountain biking, or at least with the old river crossings. Again, the intermediates are having a close race, with Steve Jockin leading, among others, Dave McMullen and Graham Owen. By the second half of the race, Steve Barnes was a surprise leader, with Barry Clark the only rider preventing a Persia whitewash. In 5th place was Adrian Timmis. Behind Adrian, Tim Davies and Nicky Craig were moving away from Chris Young and Kevin Sabiston. In 10th place, Tim Flukes prefers flat courses. The battle between Graham and Steve in the intermediates continued to the finish, with Steve getting the advantage. In the experts, it was Fred who, for a change, topped the Persia table ahead of Steve. Lovely. Tim was a few seconds down, and that made it a Persia 1-2-3, despite a brilliant ride by Barry. Steve Barnes.
The last lap, if I hadn't got on Fred's wheel, I think I'd have been way down. But a bit of encouragement from Fred and plenty of mud spraying up. I was right to come in 2nd place.
And Fred Salmon?
Lucky it was me and not Tim today. Steve was going extremely well.
For the 4th round, we return to the infamous course at Cannock Chase. Jake Elliott leads the field. He's only 1 point short of the maximum possible 60, but needs to limit the competition's gains since the best 3 of 5 count. James Sutton leads out the juveniles. And the novice men go off next. Finally, Julia Morgan heads up the novice and sports women's fields. Jake yet again showed his strength, gaining an early lead which he kept to the end. He seems to go well on any type of course. Richard Thackeray gained second after a couple of disappointing rides, with Sam Humphrey and Julian Wynne third and fourth, while Jason Shackleton and Dave Hemming took the next two places.
I'm smiling, see?
Inspired by a good race at Thetford, Nikki Crowther takes an early lead in the expert women's race. While winner at Thetford Mark Bicycle and James Hardy lead out the sportsmen. It's a steep climb and the narrowing track just after the start means only the first few manage to ride it. In the veterans, Barretto's Mike Parker heads for a win. Jeff Stanley from Team Orange has pulled out a very good second place. Paul McWaters and Steve Proud have set about a battle in the sports race. And Sally Hibberd, with a maximum of 60 mountain bike club points so far, was in devastating form. By the halfway mark, she's got 2.5 minutes lead over Deb Morrell, who's headed a chasing group. Paul McWaters breaks clear out of the woods from the sports race and takes his second victory. Sally makes it a clean sweep in the women's event. Marin's Sean Roberts takes a good third after a poor race at Thetford.
So on to the final race, and again Rally's Rob Dane leads away. With Tim Gould in Norway for a Grundig World Cup Series race, it was left to Fred Salmon to fly the Persia flag. He did this admirably, rapidly gaining a lead that was never under threat. The battle was for second, with Barry Clark initially having the advantage over Tim Davies and Nick Craig. With a number of tricky descents, this course suited Tim, and he soon got the better of Barry. Others doing well were Kevin Sabiston and Graham Rogerson, the winner here in 1988. Matching the descents, there were of course a number of short steep climbs with poor traction that made it hard to get a good rhythm going. Tim and Barry battled all the way through the race for second place, but in the end neither of them was to get it. Fred got another well-deserved win, but it was a surprise second for Steve Knight, who had a storming last lap. But this year, there was none of Cannock's famous rain and mud, but there was still the roller coaster.
The penultimate round of the series was on an altered version of last year's finals course, and on the first climb Jake Elliott, surprise surprise, was leading the junior field, though the main pack were right on his wheel. Tim Bryan leads the juveniles, riding very strongly up here where most walk.
Move! Move! Up star!
In the sports women, Katie McIndoe leads out. Halfway through the first lap, and it was Carl Sturgeon who was out front with nearly a minute's lead over Julian Wynne. The chasing group are Sam Humphrey, Andrew Lay and Jake Elliott, who had a broken chain but managed to fix it quickly. You can see from the different coloured numbers that the juveniles caught the juniors, with the novices not far behind. The climb on lap 2, and Carl seems to be back in last year's dominant form and was comfortably out in front. Sam has gradually improved all season and had moved up into second ahead of Julian, who has finished in the top 5 every race so far. Richard Thackeray there is in 4th. As the race went into the final lap, the leading two held their positions, Carl going on to win his first race of the 1990 series. Behind them there was a lot of changing places, with Dan Hope and Nick Keane moving into the top 5. In the sportswomen, Debbie Thompson came in first ahead of Julia Morgan.
And he's smiling, my goodness, he's actually smiling!
In the day's second race, Lance Ravenhill sprints from an ever-growing veterans field.
Right, on the grid, 2 people here, locked.
Full sports field charges away, led by Ian Sutcliffe. And there's James Hardy, the first of the sports riders to drop into the woods at the end of the first of 4 laps. Series leader Paul McWaters in second. The winner here last year, Andy Stevenson, blasts through on his Tioga disc wheel. Now with the women's expert race, Deb Morell is out in front, having recently come back to top form. Sally's in trouble in second, while Nikki and Sian are fighting for third, as they have done here in the finals last year. Sian's just dropped a chain. Mike Parker is well clear, as Mick Ives has also punctured. Paul has taken the lead in the sports,
Harry?
having moved ahead of James. With the accomplished road hill climber Steve Hume moving up well into third. Deb will have relished this type of fast technical course and now looks more like the champion she is, increasing her lead over Sally. Third place, Sian is closing the gap on Sally, though Nikki is again showing that she can be up there when she's on a roll. On the final lap and coming down the rocky descent, Mike Parker's lead is assured, barring mechanicals.
Slow motion one.
Tom Isa was riding strongly, ahead of Jeff Stanley in third. Deb was well clear now, Sally having been caught by Sian before dropping out. Sally knew that she would have been disqualified for wheel swapping, but had hoped to complete the race. Meanwhile, Isla Roundtree had moved up to 5th ahead of Melanie Gravel, another puncture victim. Steve Hume stole the lead from Paul McWaters on the final lap.
In the veteran race, ladies and gentlemen, from Berettas Freestyle, Mike Parker!
What went wrong, Paul?
I got baling twine around me cog. Oh.
Deb finally gets an NBC win, which in 88 and 89 came to her almost every time, while Sian Roberts yet again showed us her mettle with an excellent second.
As the expert men started, Tim Davies was aware that this has always been his lucky course. After all, it is where he won the championship last year. Though approaching the top of the main climb, it was Tim Gould again who was looking strong at the front. And teammate Fred Salmon wasn't far behind. They'd already established a nice lead over the third man, Barry Clark. Adrian Timmis was in 4th, racing again after having missed Cannock for the National Road Race Championships. Tim Davies was in 5th. To everyone's surprise, mountain bike clown James Tatlow led the intermediates. By lap 2, Gould was enjoying the clear track ahead, while Davies showed his confidence. His fortune was holding on his lucky course as he moved up into 2nd. Nicky Craig raced into 3rd place after an early puncture. He's really improved as the season has progressed. And so as Tim flies down from the top of the course, Barry in 4th place makes his way up. After having been dropped back down the field after a puncture, Fred is now moving back up into 5th place. Tim Davies will benefit from the fast rocky descent, which places a premium on good handling skills. Riders who are hardly slow, like Nick Craig and Barry Clark, still don't have Tim's reckless confidence. Flying down here is Steve Knight in 6th and Steve Dowse in 7th. In 8th place it's Jake Elliott, who's riding his 2nd race of the day after dropping out of the juniors. On the penultimate lap, there was no change in the leading pair, but Fred caught up on Nick and they did good battle for 3rd place. As Steve Knight was demonstrating how he'd improved, moving up here into 5th place. It was a great course for spectators as well as riders, because by taking shortcuts they could stay with the action all the way round, as well as watch the riders up and down the main hill. Meanwhile, Nicky seemed to be fighting off Fred's challenge, and Fred may well have gone too hard in moving back up the field. As they drop into the woods, Davies had a 15-second lead because Gould had punctured. but it was only short-lived, as it didn't take Gould long to get back into the lead and begin to fly. Davies must have thought the gods were with him, but he was still safe in second place. And Fred had regained the advantage in third. Towards the end of the race, Gould re-established a comfortable lead, though Davies would have been well pleased with what had been a great ride. Fred finally got clear in third, but only after Nick had punctured for the second time while he was ahead of him.
Oh no. Second one. Go on then, Nicky. Keep it going.
And he has to ride the last couple of miles on a rim.
UK rider Tim Gould waves his hands in the air, gives his victory salutes.
So it's a 1-2 for the Tims, with Steve Dowse getting his best result yet in fifth. Steve Knight unfortunately also punctured. Here's some of the action from the dual downhill the day before. The fastest shredders were Jamie Carr and Dan Cook, finishing with the same time, though Dan won by a wheel. There was more fun in the afternoon with the country's first dual slalom, full of thrills and spills. The eventual winner in this Eto-sponsored knockout competition was Gary Skelding.
Let's look at the points so far. Remember, the best three results count. Tim leads the board, but James has had the better of the last couple of races. Jake is dominant in the juniors, though with 40 points available at the final, it could all change yet. Julia and Debbie are equal, having swapped places all season, and Lynn has consistently been in the top four. With 2 wins and a top 5 every race, Paul looks secure. Behind him it's very tight, though Bob won't make the final, he's back in America. The battle here is between the top 2. Meanwhile, Jeff has come on strong this year, as has Barry in his first season of mountain biking. The intermediates generally have some racing experience, but aren't quite up to the experts off-road. Peter leads so far, but he can't make the final. Until the last round, Sally had looked unbeatable. If Deb and Sean are now coming to form, the finals will be very close. Tim again heads the board going into the finals, but this year he and Fred have a reasonable lead. Barring disasters, Gould should take the title.
OK, before the next bout of excitement, crack open a can of Dexter's as Tim takes you through the essential skills of racing.
Hello. Mountain bikes are about having fun. You can have more fun if you're doing it properly. So here are a few tips. We'll talk about going uphill first. The first thing to try and remember is to select the correct gear ratio and keep a nice steady rhythm going up through the climb. Try and choose your chainring first, so either select the small chainring or the middle chainring depending on the severity of the climb. If you do need to change gear going up the climb, change with the rear derailleur, and remember to ease off as you do so to ease the chain changing. The other things to remember are, as you're going up the climb, if you start to lose traction, it's probably because you've not got enough weight over the back wheel, so try and bend back a bit, but if the climb's really severe, you'll find your front wheel lifting off the ground, so you've got to be a bit of a contortionist to try and keep your back wheel on the ground as well as your front wheel. The points to remember when you're going downhill are, first, put your pedals in the horizontal position to increase your ground clearance and make sure you're not banging your pedals on any rocks. Then as you're going downhill, keep your weight right over the back. That stops your back wheel lifting off the air and you tipping forward. Also, so you don't tip forward, remember to use mainly your back brake. So you perhaps skid a bit, but it'll stop you tipping forward. Use your back brake as much as you can and then just slow down gently with your front brake. Other points to remember are, as you're going downhill, you'll have to absorb most of the shock with your arms. So keep them nice and loose. Don't hold the arms too rigidly. Be prepared to sort of move up and down a bit as you hit different rocks. If you see a rock that you really don't want to hit, don't stare at it, try and stare where you want to be going. Another point is, if you keep it in the big chain ring, you can stop the chain from bouncing about too much and perhaps derailing as you go down the climb. So chain on the big chain ring keeps the chain nice and tight. As you're going round a corner, you'll put the pedal that's on the outside of the corner down and put your weight onto that pedal. That'll increase your clearance round the bend from the pedals and it'll give you a nice comfortable ride. And the other important thing is to try and choose the line that'll give you the fastest route through the corner and accelerate out of it. The first thing to do as you come up to a dismount is obviously go the correct speed, so you're braking, and as you're braking, take your feet so they're half into the toe clip. As you put your right leg through, put your arm down to the down tube, hop off. Jumping on's fairly straightforward. You've got to be running along and then just jump on in one fluid motion, but the tricky part is getting your feet into the toe clips. That'll take a bit of practice. It also helps if you're in a higher gear. If you're on the little chain ring in the lowest sprocket, you find you can never get your feet in, so gear up a couple of gears before you dismount. Other important things to remember are safety. That means always wearing a helmet and having a properly maintained bike. And for that, I'm going to hand you over to John.
Thanks, Tim. After each ride, a few minutes basic maintenance, basically looking after your bike, will help it last longer and be more pleasurable to ride. We haven't got time to go into the details here, so let's just have a look at the essentials, starting with the headset. To check your headset, jam on the front brake and try and rock the bike backwards and forwards. If it moves around here, then the headset's loose and needs adjusting. To do this, you need a set of headset spanners like this. Fit on, there and there. Screw the bottom brace down, and then when it's smooth and the headset turns freely but doesn't rock backwards and forwards, tighten the top nut down against the bottom nut. Next, you should check your bottom bracket. It's the bearing that the crank's pivots on down here. To check it for play, grab the crank here and try and move it from side to side that way. If it wobbles or feels loose, then it needs adjusting, and you need bottom bracket spanners to do that. If you don't feel proficient to adjust the bottom bracket yourself, or you haven't got the right tools, get a bike shop to do it. It's not an expensive job. Check the wear on your brake blocks. All brake blocks have some sort of groove in the surface, and the brake blocks should be replaced when they've worn down to the bottom of that groove. As brakes wear, cantilever brakes will move down the rim and can go into the spokes. U-brakes will move up the ring and can score the side of the tyre and cause your tyre to burst. So it's very important to keep an eye on the adjustment. To adjust them, you need a 10mm spanner, 6mm Allen key, and you move it around by loosening the spanner off at the back, moving the brake block up and down and round so it's in the right position. Next, you need to lubricate the moving parts on the bike, starting with the chain. Spin the chain backwards through the derailleur and spray lubricant onto it as it comes past. Try and keep the chain moving so that you don't use too much lube. You only need to be fairly sparing with lubricant. If you put too much on, mud and crud sticks to it and helps to wear out the chain. Other moving parts that need attention include the rear derailleur. You need to lubricate the pivot points, the parts that actually turn. On, for example, a rear derailleur, that's here, here, here and here. Just put a little squirt of lubricant into them all. The lube will work its way in and protect them from rust and keep them moving freely. Similarly, on the front derailleur, lubricate here and here. While you're lubricating the chain, check the wear. To do this, chain on the big ring at the front and see if the chain will lift clear of the chainring teeth. If it moves much more than this, then it's worn and should be replaced. This is fine, this is a fairly new chain. And on the brakes, being very careful to keep the lubricant away from the rims, lube the pivot points here. As well as the brakes, you should also lubricate the brake and gear cables. If the brake blocks have worn and the brakes have become slack, take up the slack by unscrewing this barrel adjuster and then screwing the lock ring against the lever to hold it in place. Check the condition of the tread of the tyres. If the tread is worn so that the middle section of the tyre particularly is almost smooth, it's time to replace your tyres. Also look at the condition of the sidewalls. If there are any cuts or scoring marks from the brake blocks, the tyre should be replaced before those scoring marks go right through and cause you to burst the tyre. 10 minutes of routine maintenance after every ride will save you money in the long run by stopping your components wearing out. If anything is wearing, it's best to replace it sooner rather than later. Particularly components like chains can wear other parts of the bike as they wear out themselves. The best of all, a well-maintained bike is much nicer to ride. And shiny ones like these are lovely to look at.
British finals, a number of our top riders travelled out to Durango in the Coloradan Rockies for the first official mountain bike world championships. The highlight for the British contingent was Gould's victory in the men's hill climb, when he put nearly a minute between himself and second place Ned Overend. Tim also got third in the cross country with a brilliant but stressful ride, but was disappointed to have missed out on the winner's rainbow jersey. In the juniors, Dave Hemming got a silver medal in the downhill, plus a win in the Stock Beginners Observed Trials. While Jake Elliott confirmed his promise with a bronze medal in the cross country. Deb Murrell got a respectable 19th place in both the downhill and the cross country, despite a puncture which dropped her down into the 30s at one point. And Sally Hibberd achieved 10th in a very strong veterans category, where the age barrier was 30. The rest of the team had reasonably good results. There were injuries and 2 cases of food poisoning that took riders out of serious contention, however. In the first major clash with the Americans, the British and the rest of the Europeans came home very proud of themselves. The first World Championships had been a huge success.
So to the finals themselves, and the action starts on Saturday morning with the hill climb.
First off on this 3.5 mile gruelling Welsh climb are the juveniles. With 10 points at stake for each category, it was Tim Bryan and James Sutton who were the early leaders. Obviously, neither plans on letting the other get away. James proved to be the stronger climber, finishing in 20 minutes, 1 minute and 10 seconds ahead of second place Michael Horrock. Starting 10 minutes later are the juniors. Sam Humphries goes straight to the front. By the time the climb proper had started, Oliver Scott has a slight lead over Carl Sturgeon, but the main challenges were all very close. Carl, at not full fitness though, had to drop out. At the finish, it was Gavin Atkinson who was the first in, having passed a number of juveniles on the way, and finished in just over 17 minutes. 20 seconds behind him, chasing pair Julian Wynne and Nick Keane, Julian winning the sprint. We joined the start of the novice men's race with Mudcam, our on-bike camera, to see the shuffling for positions. If you were wondering which ones are the novices, they're the ones who haven't yet learnt to check out the route before the race. You can see though that on the steepest part of the course there's nothing wrong with their riding. Andrew Poon led all the way to the finish. Not everyone finds it quite so easy though. The sports women is the tightest category at the moment, with the leading two, Julia and Debbie, going straight to the front. But halfway up, Julia was well clear, while long-distance tourer Sally Bull and Tracy Hardcastle battle it out for second. Tracy gets there in the end though. Debbie Thompson lost valuable points, eventually finishing 8th. Lynn Trewin behind her finished 4th. The sports are the hardest category to pick a winner from. The field soon stretched out, with Patrick Greenaway pulling away for a strong win. The main chase initially came from the Brixton Cycles quartet. Though in the end, James Hardy got to second place. Just think about working this hard for 20 minutes. I do. For the vets, the hill climb was going to be essential, and there was no surprise when Mick Ives took the lead. Though what was unexpected was that Mike Parker being so far back down the field. This creaking is his cranks, not his knees. 30 seconds ahead of Jeff Stanley in second, Mick got a very useful win. Intermediates away. By the second half of the climb, it was still close, though the leader was junior Dan Hope. He'd punctured in his race and had decided to have another go. There was a chasing group of 6 on his tail, though. Near the finish, Matthew Denby had put in a tremendous burst to break away, finishing 25 seconds clear in about 17.5 minutes. Second was Ivan Marchant, with Chris Lay also passing Dan in the finishing stretch. The penultimate race was the expert women, with Sally Hibberd the favourite. Sally put in an early burst and no one went with her, and she soon had a definite lead. Deb led the chasing group of 5, knowing that she couldn't let Sally gain too many points on her in the hill climb if she was to retain the title.
Camera.
Sally finished in 19.5 minutes. 36 seconds ahead of Sian Roberts in second. Caroline Alexander puts in a final charge to snatch third from a tired and disappointed Deb Morrell. Last off were the expert men, with the World Hill Climb champion Tim Gould in the presence There was no doubt who was the favourite. The rest of the field, it was a question of how long they could stay with him. Tim just attacks as the gradient gets steeper. Paul Hinton leads the chasing group. Fred Salmon and Barry Clark pass him though. Nick Craig and Tim Davies were the only other contenders in this race. Tim absolutely stormed up it in about 15.5 minutes, but Fred had incredibly good ride, only 16 seconds down, with Nick a further 20 seconds down. Further down the field, some still had to sprint for the finish. Plenty of energy left, though, it seems.
The afternoon brought a swing in direction when riders turned themselves around to face the awesome downhill. This was also to have had 10 points available in each category, but due to a problem with the results, they had to be scrubbed.
Which way? That one.
Though I doubt if anyone regretted doing the ride.
You'll never change. You are the kind of guy from you dance. It's my life. But I don't care. You wanna tell me how to live my life, but you just don't care. It's my life. But you don't care. No. You want a chance to lead a better life, but you just wouldn't dare. Ow. Now listen, people. It seems like Oakland is where you are. And if you wanna be the mystery, you think is more. I keep following my own intuition. That's the only thing that tells me it's true. I said the things that you do could make a fool out of you. Although I've warned you many times before. So get a grip on yourself. You haven't got to remember your name. It seems you'll never learn. You are the kind of guy who wants you again. It's my life, but I don't care. No, you wanna tell me how to live my life, but you just don't live. It's my life, but you don't care. No, you want a chance to lead a better life, but you just don't care. Guitar, go!
As race day dawns and people mull over yesterday's results, it's time for the inevitable last-minute maintenance. While we wait for the first race, let's have a look at the course as we follow Jamie Carr round with Mudcam.
From the start, there is a mile-long, gentle climb up a wide fire track. Plenty of time for riders to sort themselves out. The incline flattens briefly before the riders turn off into a single track climb through the trees. Initially, this is easy going, but as it gets steeper and becomes rocky, you'll be really working hard to keep on. There's a second stretch of fire track before another almost unrideable rocky climb. Then it's rolling out onto the forestry road for a climb to the top of the course at 2,000 feet. This section is very exposed, so if the wind's up, you'll know about it, until you drop back down into the trees and onto the lakeside. Now there's an easy flat track. It's fast, but but also a narrow bridge to check your nerves. Past the lake, an up a boggy slope strewn with logs. Here you have to carry. Then after a short section of single track, into the woods again and it's back onto fire track to descend through the hairpins. As you come out into the open you can go as fast as you like, with only the odd rocky patch and finally a sharp left-hand hairpin to slow you down. Back into the woods and a track that's almost a stream, and it'll only be ridden by the best. Then it's onto the fast tracks again with a straight smooth line that the riders will spin out on. Again there's a sharp left-hand corner to overcome. Remember yesterday's downhill? Finally you'll hit the tarmac with the odd hump to get air off just at the end of the 6-mile lap.
Setting off at 10 in the morning, other juveniles. James Sutton and Tim Bryan are on equal points, so it's going to be a close battle.
The juniors are nervous, though Jake Elliott should be feeling quite comfortable with a 5-point lead, and neither Carl Sturgeon or Richard Thackeray are racing today. They do 3 laps.
The novice men are the next off with a field of about 100. They are also going to do 3 laps, followed by the sport women. Julia Morgan here has a 7-point lead, and the novice women go off just behind them.
Heading into the woods near the end of the first lap, and that's Sam Humphreys in 4th, while at the lead it's Jason Shackleton, Jake Elliott in hot pursuit.
The next 2 into the woods are Dan Hope and Nick Keane, who's been improving too towards the end of the season. And it's Julian Wynne there, another who regularly finishes well.
And Sam Humphreys comes out of the woods. And he gives a word of encouragement to Oliver Scott, who was in 3rd but has punctured.
And of course he has to fix it without assistance from anyone. It's good that despite being competitive, the juniors are also good friends and regularly gee each other on.
Yeah, when they pass each other. Let's join Mudcam through the hairpins with some of the novices.
In the sports, Julia is obviously pleased as she approaches the halfway mark. She has a 25-second lead over nearest rival Debbie Thompson, with Lynn True a further minute and a half down and just ahead of Sally Bull. Mountain biking, it's a dirty business. Others showing well at this stage are Julia's teammate Tracy Hardcastle and Jenny Leckie.
We'll join Mudcam now, following Lynn as she climbs out of the trees before the fast descent towards the end of the lap. Near the top of the course on lap 2, and Jason is out of Jake's sight. With Sam, who was 2nd in the championship at the start of the day, close behind in 3rd, and well aware that if Jake should have any mechanical problems, he could get the championship. Let's have a look at the top 5. Gavin Atkins goes through into 6th. While Julia is on the steep part of the climb, increasing her lead, the first juniors make their way through the hairpins, and we join Mudcam following Sam, speedway style.
Sam is still in 3rd, but only a few seconds behind Jake, while Nick in 4th is having a good ride. At the beginning of this year, he was regularly finishing 9th against the same field. And chasing Julian in 6th is yesterday's hill climb champ, Gavin. There's grinning Dave Hemming.
Julia's on her way down to the end of the race and the championship. While Jason's looking comfortable in the lead and heading for his first MBC win. He's just finished his A-levels and he's had a bit more time to get out on the bike for some training.
Here's Jake with mudcam on his tail. Let's follow him for a bit as he heads out into the open and onto the fastest downhill part of the course. He's now almost sure of the championship.
Of course, Jake was the first overall national champion in 1987, but that was just one race and a field of about 50. Sam again shows us cornering speedway style. If you get this wrong, you'll know about it.
Dropping into the woods for the last time, Julia has a 1 minute and 40-second lead over Debbie. This short section is notching up more punctures than the whole of the rest of the course.
There she goes.
And remember, he has to fix it himself.
Back up the course and Nick is still in fourth, as Jason steams through with a 1 minute 5-second lead. While Deirdre Cargill has moved up to 7th in her race. Also in 7th is Ollie Scott, who's moved back up after his puncture.
Dave Hemming is going into reverse.
So Julia wins the race and the championship.
Should be riding experts in the series.
Jason's obviously chuffed with finally getting an MBC win. But he can't prevent Jake from taking the overall victory. What was the hardest part of the race, Jason?
Riding behind him.
Did you decide you were going to beat him, or was it just the way it panned out?
The way it turned out, I think. You always want to win though, don't you? But if you don't set out wanting to win, it's no use going out, is it?
Set out riding most of the racing on my own, and Jason caught me, and he caught me on the rocky stream bit, climb. Then from there on, I kept falling off. I think it was his shoes. Kept falling off, and he just went away. Put a gap between us, I couldn't bridge it. It's right at the top of the climb, it's like a big headwind. And then that's it, he just got a gap and kept it. But I did a good ride.
Nick King comes into fourth, while the top three congratulate each other.
The vets are the first off in the second race, and Nick Ives is in a strong position with a 3-point lead over Mike Parker. Sally Hibberd knows that as long as she's within 2 points of Deb Murrell and 3 of Sian Roberts, she'll be the champion.
Go on, Dan!
In the sports, James Hardy is 2 points ahead of Paul McWaters, who accidentally missed the uphill, and with a further 5 points to the next man, it'll be between those two for the title.
We pick up the leading vets at the lake halfway through the first lap. It's Mike, Mick, and then Lance Ravenhill. But that's the next three, Tom Eisel, Barry Mitchell and Jeff Stanley right behind them. Not so close in the women's race, with Sally's tactics obviously to lead from the start. Caroline Alexander is 25 seconds behind her.
Caroline is a serious challenger for next year. Two of the more established riders, Sian and Deb, battle it out for third.
In the sportsmen, unknown rider Keith Jones is over a minute clear, with the chasing group of 8 close together and led by Paul McWaters.
And that's Melanie Gravel, the 5th woman.
Missing from that front group was James Hardy, and that's good news for Paul, but it's early days yet.
We pick up Sally on the hairpins. This course could suit her with a lot of fast climbs and no overly technical descents.
That's Paul passing Sian, who has now moved up to second, and Deb's also overtaken Caroline to go into third.
Yep.
Coming out of the woods, and Lance is leading the vets field, but the group of 6 are still all together.
It's very rare in mountain biking to find the field staying so close, especially on a course like this, which strings them out on the carrying sections.
Paul is still chasing the elusive Keith Jones, with the chasing group only a few seconds down on him, led by Julian Wall.
Sian's now closing the gap on Sally, and with Deb only 15 seconds behind her, the women seem to be coming back together. Melanie in 5th is working hard. She'll be hoping to regain her early season form. We're following Deb with mudcam as she heads down to the end of the lap.
Mike has finally made a move from the other vets. He must have caught them napping as he seems to have got away on the fire tracks. Barry is working hard to get back on terms. Ah, finally we found Keith Jones, who's still leading the sports.
Let's have a quick look at the vets' position so far. If it was to finish like this, Mike Parker would be the champion.
It's all changed in the women's as well, with Sian now leading, having passed Sally when her chain got jammed.
So the main sports field are tromping through the woods and showing little respect for their bikes. They're sensitive beasts, you know?
While the leaders are at the lake, Dave Smith, a training expert on Mountain Biker magazine, obviously knows his stuff. He's just taken the lead. Paul is close behind, followed by two of the very strong Brixton Cycles team, Nigel Turner and Mark Bizeigel. Julian Wall in sixth, and Patrick Greenaway, yesterday's hill climb champ, crosses the bridge. Let's see the sports position so far.
On the hairpins, Mickey's back up with Mike and he'll want to stay that way to secure his title. In the following pair, Lance is trying to get away from Jeff and back on terms with the first two. Since Mike made his move, the group has really stretched out.
As the leading women cross the bridge, Sian, Sally and Deb are really close now, and since they haven't heard about the downhill results being scrapped, Deb believes if she can get 2 places ahead of Sally, she will retain her title. So with Sally in Deb's sight, the pressure is really on.
Further down the field, Caroline has dropped off the pace, while Melanie is closed on her. As has Nikki Crowther in 6th. Let's have a look at their timings so far. It looks like 2 races, one for first and another for 4th.
Caroline goes through with Melanie now hot on her tail. We'll join Mudcam as they battle it out for 4th. Sorry about the flashing.
As they come out of the woods, Sian has a 30-second lead, but now it's Deb in 2nd. She knows what she has to do, and I don't think Sally can stop her.
Couple of minutes down, and Caroline is only a few seconds ahead of Nikki.
On Nikki?
Yeah, hi.
We hear also that Mel has a flat tyre. This race is full of incident.
On the climb for the final time, and Mike is still trying to get away from Mick, but it won't alter the overall results unless the next two, Jeff and Lance, can get ahead of Mick.
Good game, good game.
And Lance is tiring.
Barry's in 5th and has been riding a lone race for over 1 lap, but is closing on Lance now. Sian is well aware of how close behind her Deb is, since she's on home turf and the crowd are giving her all the info. Sian has now increased her lead to 45 seconds, and time is running out for Deb to catch her, though she is slowly opening up the time on Sally.
That's Dave coming out of the woods for the final time, while Mike Parker is the first to cross the line in the vets. Sharna's up the pace at the end and seems safe with Deb over a minute behind.
How did Mike find the race against Mick?
Once it was clear he was going to win the overall, he stopped fighting me, I think. He's well clear of the third man, I think. He'll be all right.
You enjoy it, though?
Yes, good race, yeah. My swan song.
Mick comes in just over a minute down, but more importantly in second, with Jeff just 10 seconds behind him. How'd it go, Mick?
Yeah, I got a concussion, I needed it. I played a negative race today. I mean, it wasn't like an ordinary ride, was it, mate? It was a case of watching everybody. He knew what he got to do, I knew what I got to do. So did Jeff.
Dave Smith comes in for his first MBC win, while the first three Wrinkleys compare bruises. Mark Bicycle snatches third from Paul, but with James only seventh, Paul is the champion.
How was it, Dave? And?
Wet.
And?
Nice.
Sian also gets her first MBC win this year, but did Deb no favours by staying out of touch. And although a further 3 minutes down, Sally is content. She's the champion.
Yeah, well, I did the triathlon about a month ago, and that was what I was aiming for this season, really. And the training all sort of peaked for that, and it seems to have paid off. It's come back again. You know, it's been about a month since the triathlon. I haven't done much since then, so the rest has really done me good.
It went off very quickly. I think I probably paid the price on the last lap. That's the way it goes. I just had to stay there next to Deb, though. I was really fighting hard. It was a very hard race.
Here's the finals, and the expert men set off with Tim Gould 3 points ahead of Fred Salmon and 11 points clear of the next man, Tim Davies.
Here's the intermediates final. Matthew Denby is just 3 points ahead of Dave McMullen. At the Lake on the first lap, Tim Davies goes through in fifth. Gould, Clark, Salmon and Craig are ahead of him. Andy Gordon and Steve Dowse battle it out for sixth.
Ed Nicol in ninth behind Andy Shaw is the biggest surprise in the top 10 at the moment. Tim leads out of the woods, and as usual he's opened up a gap on second place. Barry is 50 seconds down. Fred and Nick seem to be trying to stay together, another 20 seconds back.
Gould is going to have yet another solo ride. Here, Matthew Denby, the overall intermediate leader and second in this race so far. And Barry's now only 30 seconds behind Tim.
We join Mudcam on the steep rocky track that Tim will be making his way up. You can see how difficult it is to keep it going. You have to fight the bike to make it do what you want. Still nothing between Fred and Nick.
Tim flies up the climb. His namesake and nearest non-Persia rival is in fifth, but nearly a minute and a half back. His title is slipping out of his grasp.
Barry's really taken to mountain biking, and although he's not challenging Gould, he could well do next year. The Welshman can't afford to let him or Nick get any further ahead if he's at least to salvage third overall.
As the main field of experts comes up the climb, the leading pair of intermediates, Colin Bryan and Matthew Denby, catch them up. You can expect to see Matthew at least riding expert in 91. Back at the lake again, Tim is maintaining his distance over Barry. And Fred and Nick are working together.
Let's have a look at the positions so far as the youngest rider in this race, 19-year-old Andy Gordon, goes through in sixth. He's showing he'll be one to watch in the near future.
And what's more, he's not even from a cycling background, but he has had trials motorbike experience, and he just loves mountain biking.
That's Steve Knight in eighth, taking a shortcut across the bridge.
Fred and Nick aren't killing themselves, they've got enough breath to chat. race enters its second half and the riders are going up the main climb. No surprises at the front.
Fred is definitely looking out for Nick. It could be that he's trying to help him up the field, since Fred's assured of second place anyway. And he's even passed Tim Davis, and he's now up to 5th.
Steve is now in 6th, having also moved up. It could be that Tim Davies has a problem and it may cost him 3rd place overall. And we're with Mud Cam here again, descending off the top of the course back down to the lake to pick up Tim Gould.
Walking along behind Barry is Simon Burney, Peugeot team manager and an ex-cyclocrosser. He's obviously waiting to give Fred an extra water bottle. On a warm day like this, the riders will really need it.
Nick is glued to Fred's wheel and Andy's looking very good. Here comes Tim out of the trees at the bottom. And there's Sean McConamara with Tim Wilson, going past at the lake in 8th and 9th places. Apparently, Tim Davies is punctured, but we hear he's moving back up the places.
Let's have a look at the timing so far. Tim's not opening the gap on Barry at all, though they are definitely moving away from the rest of the field.
Here comes Davies now, back up in 11th, but 4.5 minutes down on Andy Gordon, who he needs to catch to assure himself of 3rd place.
Chris Bryan leads the intermediates. Twisting down through the hairpins, and Tim has caught Steve Knight.
Hello, Betty.
There's Jeremy Watton, 4th in the intermediates. And 7th expert, Daffith Roberts, Sean's husband, makes his way up the steepest part of the climb.
Tim's now dropped Sean and Tim Wilson and he's really pushing hard to close the gap on Dafford.
Tim Gould could get off and walk and still be national champion. And he's even slightly opening the gap over 2nd. Barry's also safe.
Fred's now alone in 3rd. He's obviously decided to secure his own placing since Nick seems to be tiring slightly.
Up the climb there's Ed Nicol in 12th. Just behind him, Tim Flukes.
Sorry, I can't run at this late stage of the season.
Steve Dowse in 6th place is only a couple of minutes ahead of Tim Davies, who is probably going faster than anyone else on the course at the moment, but it could be too late.
With Barry in the woods for the final time, Tim Gould comes in to win the race and the national championship at his 3rd attempt, while teammate Fred, comfortably in 3rd, ensures his 2nd place overall, and Andy sends a warning to everyone that he'll be up there next year.
We asked Tim what he thought of the course.
Yeah, it was a good course. The uphill was very, very tricky, and it's a matter of picking your way around the rocks, and it was quite difficult to put all the power in and find your way around the rocks without sort of skidding and slipping about. So it was a lot of skill required, and then the descents were probably the fastest ones we've had all year. We really got top gear spinning, so it was nice, a good change. It's nice to have something a bit different.
Is this a little bit of consolation for you, having not quite got the World Championship?
No, I don't think so.
Tim was 15 points in front of the 3rd next person, and I was 10 points, so I already had to finish in the top 10. So a little bit, you know, trying to help Mickey Craig a bit to pull himself up there, you know.
I've been riding cyclocross for 12 years, since I was 9. and it suits me better, mountain biking. And if it hadn't been for mountain biking, I probably would have packed in by now, because it really gave me something to go for.
A national champion at 15, James Sutton came to mountain biking for the first time this year and had a season-long battle with Tim Bryan. They'll both be juniors worth watching in '91. Jake Elliott has matured into one of the most likeable young men on the British circuit and a superb rider to boot. He's looking forward with relish to turning expert. The sports women's class has grown from nothing to a thriving scene in just 1 year. A fitting champion, Julia Morgan, has worked hard and pulled the standard up with her. Epping Forest's Paul McWaters has impressed everyone with his determined riding style and will to win. He's brought a rare touch of consistency to the often erratic sports class. Still racing and winning at 51, Mick Ives is an inspiration to everyone who thinks sport is just for the young. How much longer can he go on? Another relative newcomer to mountain biking, Matthew Denby, is a gifted athlete who holds the British Army push-up record and will be riding experts in '91. After a long, hard year, Sally's consistency and storming early season fitness was rewarded with her first national title. Tim Gould is the dominant force in British mountain bike racing. It's no surprise to see the World Hill Climb champ taking the national title. The Schmooze Team Trophy goes to the team which consistently gets the highest 3 riders. It's seen here being collected by the tall men of Karate GT.
Give it a go, you'll love it.
You're running with the wind, flying free, yeah. You're running with the wind, running. Whoa, whoa, yeah. I'm flying free, yeah. As a bird, with the wind. Come on, come on. Running with the wind, I'm running with the wind, running. Running with the wind, I'm running with the wind. I'm running with the wind, I'm running with the wind. Running with the wind, I'm running with the wind, running. Running with the wind.